Thank you so much, Alex. That's lovely. Hello, Deborah.
Hello.
How have you been doing recently?
Thank you all for coming. It's so nice to get to do this with you. We've never done anything.
At all, ever, anything ever, no.
But so first, just kind of like why birds? I mean, I feel like most of your books are, natural history is not a kind of unusual subject for you, but they're usually more macho natural history, where you're like walking across England or trying to build a rock pool or sort of more intellectual subjects like pre-Socratic philosophers or Homer or the King James Bible. So why Little Tiny Birds?
Little Tiny Birds, well, I'd always been really rather uninterested in birds. I'd been actually indifferent to birds. I'd kind of let them slide by without looking at them. And one day, I'll show some slides about this in a minute, but one day I was making a radio show about Homer on the Trojan Plain, and I was sitting on the Bronze Age tumulus there called the Tomb of Achilles. And I was making it with a great old friend of mine, a radio producer called Tim D, who's been a great birder all his life. And I was waffling away into his microphone, you know, as one does. And he said, you know, there's a woodlark singing just above you. And I said, really? Oh, it's interesting. And then continued and said, yes, and then there seemed to be larks singing in the sky above me. He said, no, not a lark, a woodlark, Adam. Really, Tim, fascinating. And so then I went on about it, and I remember his face to this day.
Every time you said lark.
Every time I said lark, of kind of disgust, despair,
Pity.
Contempt, pity, and loathing. And incredibly sharply I remember this, and feel it as a kind of reproach, that how awful it is to kind of go through life not attending to these miracle creatures in one's life. You know, these tiny things which are so easily ignored.
Yeah. No, I will say I was sort of surprised. There's like everything in this book, like a sort of bodice ripper. It's like there's like sex, polygamy, monogamy, power grabs, real estate grabs, adultery, death. It's all here.
You've got to turn the pages.
Yeah.
You've got to, we want to, you know, this. I couldn't say, okay, this is a paragraph. Birds are essentially uninteresting.
Yeah.
Nothing ever really happens in their life. No, but my God, the morals of the songbirds, I don't know if you know, are absolutely disgraceful. Yeah, so, but it's exactly, and so unless you want to know, you don't know.
Right. Well,
and we can choose not to know. And so I feel responsible like that. And I think actually our entire culture has done that. And these lovely birds, you know, these birds I now consider beautiful, are in absolutely terminal decline globally.
Yeah.
You know, 60% down.
So is that important? I mean, you open the book with this idea that's a bit of a reproach on the English love of the view, of the English landscape garden, the parkland, which we all think of, I think, as so beautiful. And you sort of turn that on its head a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the English love of the view is all about kind of carpet, really. It doesn't care what's in the view, what the constituents of the view are. And so you end up with what's happened in England, the country with the most members of nature and landscape-loving organisations, percentage-wise, in the world, and the country with the steepest and most dreadful destruction of nature in the world. Yeah. You know, Horace Walpole famously said, you know, England's very good, but you should really try to look at it through glass. You know, that is the essential crime of the English sensibility, I think, not to care or like to be self-preservative. You know. What?
You just went deep to one aspect of what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that birds are kind of symptomatic or emblematic and kind of metaphorical carriers of the state of nature. You know, they're only going to be in a good state if the world beneath them is in a good state. And so that's really what this is about. And it was also the thing that we've talked about before of, you know, Deborah was for many years an absolute hotshot magazine editor in New York, just swinging her way through the streets of Manhattan with her beautiful chauffeur-driven limo and her kind of power reality, just kind of like a halo around it. But then decided, no, actually that life is rather an empty life in a way. And Turn is now one of the great basket makers of the world. Basket maker. No, she is. Well, in my book, she is anyway. And so you chose to leave behind potency and agency and control and material reward, I could even say, for something that is much more, but also engaged with the actual, isn't it? Engaged with the actual substance of life. And I think there is something about this bird thing which is like that too. That instead of swinging around the world trying to be a kind of
traipsing around
macho hero, say, you can try to be absorbent. You know, I'll show you some pictures in a sec of
Did you make up a good word?
Yeah, I did make up a good word. We built a shed for kind of being with the birds at home. And everyone said, oh, you've just made an observatory. And I said, no. We've made an absorbatory. It is a place to sit in and suck it up, suck the reality up. And it does change one's relationship to nature if you can do that, to let it be rather than going out to kind of dominate it or use it.
It's such a mysterious and complicated world, and we know so little about it. What's going on? I mean, now we know more thanks to you and your book.
Yeah.
But I feel like after this year you spent absorbing and trying to immerse yourself in this world of birds and in their reality and figuring out what's going on with them, do you feel like you know less in a way, or do you feel like...
Yeah, I think there is that thing about the more you know, the more you're aware of how little you know.
Yeah.
But I've also, I think, I've become infinitely more boring than I ever was. Yeah, because I'm perfectly happy to sit there being and doing nothing for many months at a time.
You read us a bit.
I could read a bit, because this is about...
Also, the book is so... I mean, you're such a beautiful writer.
You're a beautiful human being then.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'd say, so that... Okay, this is about being kind of with the birds and just looking at their kind of their bright, agile life outside the windows of this hide, this birdhouse that we built. And I say here, it's strange how much happiness it brings. I can hardly tear myself away from it. I'm learning nothing. I'm seeing life in action. And it has all the pleasures of listening again and again to the same music, the confirming familiarity of those repetitions. I don't need to dominate the birds or think of them as mine, but day after day, their close co-presence brings a heartfelt, life-opening sense of well-being. There's no narrative, no crisis, no revelatory transforming of anyone's fate or hopes. The birds are merely acting out the drama of continuousness, the theatre of things happening. It feels as good as when in a dinghy and the sails are set, the world can seem for a moment to be in dynamic and coherent balance, the rig taut, the bow wave streaming past, and the wake running behind you. Perhaps this is the most banal of thoughts, the miracle that these things exist, but it is encompassing. In the grip of it, nothing matters more, not how things are, but that they are. You know, I think that's my great.
That's really good. But I think it like, this was an exercise in passivity.
Yeah.
In a way. I mean, obviously you did a ton of research and reading, but you were really sort of living amongst these birds. And I think to say you learn, I mean, I think this thing of you realize how much more there is to know, and how much we will never know, probably, is true. But I think it did, reading the book, I feel like it did change you, in that sense of like, we do have not us versus nature, but this feeling of separateness from nature. We need to protect it, we need to take care of it, as opposed to it's all, we're just part of it, and of course we take care of it because...
Yeah, I mean, I think even that, that we have to take care of it, that kind of stewardship, like managerial thing, is itself an elevation of the human ego. Yeah. And in fact, the instruction is let it be. Yeah. And so much of what we do does not let it be. Mm-hmm. And it's that, weirdly, everybody bangs on about agency and, taking control of your own life and all the rest of it. But actually, I think what I got from this experience was stop being the agent. And be the sponge. Be a kind of rice pudding in relation to life. And all kinds of benefits will accrue. You have to read the book for the benefits.
Yeah,
quite. Shall I?
You want to do a slideshow?
Shall I?
Sure.
Have we spoken enough?
Yeah, I've said enough to you.
No, you could do more.
I mean, I want to talk about Ren's sex life.
Yeah, I'll come on to Ren's sex life. Okay, let's.
No, you can do it while you.
While I look at the slides.
Yeah.
Shall I?
It's just there are so many marvelous stories, but maybe you'll do them on the slides.
I can do. Are you leaving?
Yeah.
Thanks so much. It's been really nice. It's been lovely knowing you. Okay. Good. Okay, so this is where I live. My wife Sarah is an absolutely world-class, amazing gardener. And this is her garden in the farm in Sussex, in the south of England, where we live. And it's a beef cattle farm with these lovely valleys and woods, villages. For some reason, all the cows turn their bottoms towards me for this photograph. But you can get the picture. So it's a farm in a wood, buried in the kind of thick... We've just been to a most beautiful farm today outside Marrakech, which is approaching this condition, in fact, I would say, of buriedness, embeddedness. So this is it, if I get the pointer here. So those buildings are here, and these are the fields of the farm, all interspersed with little bits of wood, which is exactly the kind of environment that birds need. It's really like a kind of giant garden of a place. And so it's rough and ready. There's nothing kind of golf coursey about it. It's thick with potential for life, bird life, among other things. Has absolutely dazzling spring flowers, garlic and bluebells in ancient woodlands. I looked up all the documents of this place, and people have been living and farming here since the early 15th century. I found the names of 51 different owners of this farm over the centuries. So it's immensely deep mulch of experience. So we were just talking about the indifference to birds. This is my father's building, which he built on the edge of the garden at Sissinghurst, where he lived, which he used to sit in there and stare out at the view and say, nothing really has changed here since Jane Austen saw it, not realising that almost everything had actually died in the view that he was staring at. But that is the view. This is a father-hate moment, but anyway, we can go on. And this is the tomb of Achilles at Troy, where I sat denying the reality of the woodlark to my friend Tim D. An amazingly beautiful place, and one of my kind of most shameful moments. But then Sarah and I were in Crete a few years later, and we came across this dazzling creature, and this was an absolute transforming moment for me, of a raven, a dead raven. It had been shot, and I was just, sometimes you kind of meet a phenomenon in the world which kind of bangs into your consciousness, and this raven was that. You can see from the beauty of that creature, this huge, powerful creature. That bill, it was shot. You see there's blood on there. But these colours, this sense of power, the extraordinary architecture of this thing, this huge, huge, terrifying claw like a Malacca cane. And I had been thinking about indifference to birds and not paying enough attention to them. And this really called out to me and said, for God's sake, you can't really live the rest of your life without knowing about these things. And so at Perch Hill, we have a field that kind of collapsed. It had a landslip, and it became, having been a field with cows in 2004, by 15 years later, had turned into a small wood. And in that place, that is what that field became. And we decided to build a hide there. Because, you know, birds hate being looked at. There's real science about this. If you stare at a bird, it flies away. If you particularly stare at a bird with two eyes, it flies away. If you stare at a bird with one eye, it's much more likely to stay there, because it knows that the two eyes are the predatory look. And the predator will transfix a bird and get it, the cat or whatever. And so to hide is the way to get close, to get to this absorbent relationship with birds. Not binoculars, which are like giant eyes, but hiding oneself. And so this was the hide we built, right up against the trees. The trees just coming in through the windows. A lovely place to hide from the rest of the world, really. So buried in the wood with the life of the trees immediately outside. And it wasn't long after we had built that when suddenly I found that the hide that I thought was for me just sitting there being absorbent was also occupied by a wren. This wren, it used to dance around the thing. This is a very bad photograph. It was the only photograph I could get in it. I didn't know its sex. You can't sex a wren just from the look of it. And so I called it John Emily. It's obviously a kind of gender non-specific creature, but it lived with me, and in this absolutely kind of beautiful, bright, buzzy, completely alive life, hiding from the cold of the winter, and then coming to sit on the branches just outside the windows of the birdhouse. These fabulously alive, sort of dynamic creatures. And the wren, well, wrens are one of my favorite things. They're tiny. They weigh as much as 2 sheets of A4 paper. But they travel the world. They're obviously here. They began life on the eastern seaboard of Canada, have found their way all the way across Eurasia, through the Himalayas, through Central Asia, through the Mediterranean, up into the British Isles, Scandinavia, Iceland. The only place they've yet to reach is Greenland. So there was a joke earlier in the year about J.D. Vance and the wren, but I can't remember what it was now. But anyway, the point about the wren is that it often dies in the winter because it's so small. It's good to be small because you don't have to eat much to keep going, but it also makes you very vulnerable to the cold. And so wrens often die in the winter, but they often come zooming back afterwards. This is the graph of the wrens. They have this extraordinary zigzag graph. And the reason they can do that is, as Deborah says, they have unbelievably dynamic sex life. A male wren will in its territory, will make a series of nests, maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 in its territory of maybe about a hectare, say, or slightly less than a hectare. And having made its stick nests, they're rather crude wooden nests, it then goes and sings outside his nests, and sings to passing lady wrens and saying, would you like to maybe come into this nest here? It's very nice. So I've got another one over here. And tours her round the nests. And she then chooses one and literally then feathers the nest, fills it with feathers into which she can lay her eggs, But the male wren's job is not yet over, because he then goes out again and sees there's any more female wrens happen to be passing, and said, I've got 8 nests here. You can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, or 8, because unfortunately 5 is already on, and can have up to 9 different wives. And so that's the reason that this graph does this. It crashes in the cold. It zooms up, driven by lust. That's why we love the wren. So, in the birdhouse, the birds started to arrive, and this is really like a picture show of the amazing, amazing beauty of these things when you come close to them. This is a female bullfinch, which I found sitting in the snow, almost dying, I think, but I warmed it up, and it looked at me with that inquiring eye. And after a while, warmed up and started to flutter its wing and flew away, and that was that. But these are a kind of northern migrant called the bramblings. We were talking earlier about the extraordinary colour sense that nature has. And in this museum, and looking around all the marvellous contents of the museum downstairs and the Hamish Bull show, there is something dazzlingly inventive and even unlikely about the way in which nature devises colour for its creatures. Like this is a great spotted woodpecker, a juvenile one. That red cap is a kind of warning that it is a juvenile. This is a little nuthatch. A siskin, I don't think they come here. This, of course, does come here. It's a famous bird in Morocco, the goldfinch. And I do think that if you look at that, you can easily see a reflection of the famous Saint Laurent Mondrian dress. Well, you laugh. But in fact, the black outline of the panels, the uncompromising chromatic distinctions, the whiteness to set it all off, these are absolutely thriving in the United Kingdom, but in decline here, because I'm sure you know that these are the great Morocco songbirds, and that many are captured here, and there was a survey done here, and they're in trouble for the number of goldfinches that are caught here. They're ferocious birds. It isn't a world of sweetness. It's a world of kind of mutual aggression. It's a kind of Darwinian theatre. I'm almost wordless about this, because it's merely to say that if you can come close, you can come to appreciate the kind of richness of what is out there. That is a bird. That's one of the commonest birds in the United Kingdom, the chaffinch, male chaffinch, which usually just flicks away. Birds like to disappear. They don't hang around for you. But if you can hide, you can start to feel their kind of vivid reality and start to become things which you can think, can I do something to make a world or attain a world in which these things can thrive? These are here, the greenfinches. And I look at that and I think that kind of doesn't really belong in England. It's beyond Englishness. It looks like something that belongs in Amazonia. But this is a classic and fascinating example of what has gone wrong with our relationship with nature, that these birds are in absolutely almost terminal decline. I think they've lost 90% of their numbers in the last 30 years because they have been poisoned on the bird feeders that we put out for them. They have caught diseases at the bird feeders, and the diseases have killed them, a terrible choking disease, which they starve to death. And so these are really endangered in England now, not for any other reason, but that we have been feeding and transmitting diseases at our bird feeders. I always look at this redpoll and think that is exactly like one of my grandchildren after eating a kind of blackcurrant fool for lunch. But isn't that a beautiful thing? Don't you think it's just? And no one ever sees, they're very common birds, but they're too small, they're very shy, you never see them. This is a bird called a tree creeper. And it picks little bugs out of the trunks of trees. And it has this absolutely dazzlingly white, pristine breast. If I whip back here and go to the woodpecker, woodpeckers are often filthy. They also pick, obviously, at the wood. And for some reason or other, the tree creepers maintain this total laundered cleanness. And the reason is that they stand there on their tree and the light is reflected off their breast onto the tree so that they can pick out the tiniest bugs from in the bark. A cuckoo, does anyone know that? Mad cuckoo that arrived in Sarah's. But look at this, I always say I look at that and I think that's among, really beautifully dressed English gentlemen. Or like a kind of Wessex Thomas Hardy farmer, just ready for his daughter's wedding, don't you think? And that's another tit, a marsh tit. So, on they go. I mean, I have a mountain of these. This tiny bird, I don't know if it comes here. Does it come here, this bird? Does anyone know? Called the gold crest in English. It's the smallest bird we have and a phenomenal bird. It migrates from northern Russia to the shores of the Mediterranean, I think to the northern shores of Africa. And I can't remember how much it weighs, but it weighs less than a wren. And it has a very, very high peeping voice. So high that I, of my age, can't hear it. And the great bird organisation in Britain, the British Trust for Ornithology, was in a terrible anxiety a few years ago because they thought that all these beautiful goldcrests had disappeared from England. They had a serious meeting in London, everyone thinking, what on earth can we do about this? They seem to be going. And somebody said, well, how old are the people you're sending out to listen for them? And, 50s, 60s, all the old boys, who are interested in these things. So we'll try sending out some 20-somethings. The country was awash with gold crests. Couldn't move for them. This is a bird that comes here, a ring ouzel. I looked it up. It's called Merle du Plastron, or Plastron, I think, in French. And it just passes through a passage migrant at home. It spends the summers up in the Scottish Highlands, comes south through Sussex in the autumn, just right now, and then comes and spends the winter in the Atlas. And this is a female bird. I'd never seen it before this picture was taken. Another migrant which also comes here, sedge warbler, and others like that. Okay, so in my hide that we built in the next to the wood, come breeding time is when the drama really begins, because in the walls of the hide I built some nest boxes which the birds could get into from the outside, but on the inner wall, looking into the middle of the hide, it had a glass wall with a little door so that I could look and see what was going on inside the nest. So this was the most exciting moment, the first time that a bird had come in and started to build a nest, chucked a little bit of moss on the floor of the box, and then after a while it had started to build up, you see, with a layer of grass and moss, sheep's wool, some feathers, some deer hair in there. I just looked at that and thought, oh, this is like Persephone's bower, this beautiful thing. And the wonderful thing, they make a huge pile, giant duvet of all that stuff, and then the female bird gets into the middle of it and turns herself round and round and round with her breast making this little tiny cup into which she will lay the eggs. And so there is a great tit, like yours, in the nest. And so there are two of the nests. Some of the boxes have this extra board on it because woodpeckers come to the outside and they have a disgustingly long tongue. I don't know if you know this, which says most of the time wrapped around their brain here, and so it's like that. And they can extend their tongue right out here like that and pick out with sticky at the end and can pick eggs out of nests. So that board is meant to prevent a woodpecker doing that. But you see that these eggs are speckled. And somebody, a French woman whose name I can't remember now, analysed the eggs of a great tit and found out that the more and spottier, the bigger and more spots there were on an egg, the healthier the chick was inside, and that they are actually signals of antioxidants in the hen bird. And so what happens is that she lays an egg every day for maybe 14 days, something like that at the best. And after every morning, probably just at dawn. And after she's laid it, she goes out for an expedition around the wood. And the cockbird then comes in and inspects the eggs. And the spottier the eggs, the more effort he will make to look after her and bring her more food. If she's delivering rubbish white eggs, he simply doesn't bother. Wives have to be worth it. We all know, I know I won't go on down that line, no, that's too much. These are the tit killers. This is a woodpecker smashing its way into one of my boxes. You can see that absolutely hammering away, and they can destroy entire broods of little baby birds. But then they hatch and gradually grow. The adults bring them flies and caterpillars, and they become these sort of magical little things, desperately overcrowded after 3 weeks or so, and then they're gone, and they go, and you're left just with this empty, used nest. It's over. Very occasionally, one of the chicks gets left behind when all of the others are gone, and this was a chick that was in one of my boxes, wailing and crying at me. I couldn't get to it, and the next day it died. And we had a cremation, obviously. Very solemn ceremony for that. But then the rest of them are out there. Like this is just the most magical aspect of spring. Suddenly this surge of life all around you with the adults, them wailing away, saying, give me food, give me food. The adults just working themselves to the bone to feed them, and very successfully. But you can see that this poor adult is looking rather ragged because it's been, I don't know if any of you are young parents here, but this is essentially what happens. I know young mothers who look like this, actually, and I was desperately worried when I first saw a bird like that, but it's just a kind of state of complete exhaustion. When the chicks go, then they get a new set of feathers and everything is fine. So how are we doing here? 10-2. These are graphs of what's happened to the birds, in the whole selection of birds. And you can see that really they have just crashed. These are graphs that begin in 1960 on the left and go up to 2020-something on the right. And one after another has faded away. Those up at the top there is the greenfinch. So this was us feeding them away through the 70s, 80s, 90s. 2010, that disease did. The same thing happened to the chaffinch. Others have had terrible declines earlier. This is an absolutely universal pattern. This is a beautiful migrant, the white-throat, which spends its winters in Africa, as does the wheatear. So there are many things that are bringing these down. The destruction of, the chemical farming of Europe has done terrible damage to them. There have been also difficulties here in Africa that the woods that they used to overwinter in south of the Sahara, many of them have been cut down for charcoal, and so the places for them to winter have disappeared. And for many of the migrants, like the garden warbler or the willow warbler or the wood warbler, which are beautiful singing birds, most beautiful birds, many of them suffered 90% decline in the last 30, 40 years. And so, you could hold your head in your hands over this. But there are things to be done, and the things to be done are that we can try to make the country for them better, both here and there. And this is a hedge we planted at Perch Hill a few years ago, and it's a kind of thick, woolly, fruity, seedy, nesty, protective, a kind of not a denuded country. It's very like the farm we went to today, that it has a kind of thickness in which birds can hide. They need to hide, they need to feed, they need to drink, and they need to have sex. If you can give them that, life will be absolutely perfect. So this is our farm as it is today here. And this is what we're going to do with it. We're just going to thicken the whole thing up, just make it into this kind of embeddable place, a place in which you can in which the birds can be happy. And I do think that if birds can be happy in a place, then probably human beings can be happy there too. Okay, that's the end of my slideshow. Deborah, do you want to come back here? I don't know how we've done on time here.
Well, let's just take a few questions. I mean, I'll start.
Yeah, you start.
But, that was fantastic. That's fascinating. But I will say the book is, this situation is dire, but the book is about magic.
It is.
It's about song, and I think there's this very interesting thing that happens when you're absorbed in their world and learning about them. Even just the way we think about time and property and territory, we think we own a property, even though generations will come before us and they came after us. But this sense of everything just being in motion and regenerating, and when you showed all those beautiful pictures, it's like there's reasons for every one of those beautiful things, and you really get into the intelligence, I guess, for lack of a better word, of bird life or of nature itself, to regenerate itself, these things are, the architecture of those birds is all kind of purpose-built for their survival.
They're evolved. I mean, the word that biologists uses is fit.
Yeah.
They are fit. They are made to fit.
And they're made to survive.
And they're reasons to survive, to thrive, to have offspring. And we were talking just yesterday about this marvelous Belgian philosopher called Vinciane Desprez.
Okay.
Who has written about bird song. And she said, and territory, that don't see, you can look at these exquisite things, which is like what people used to look at while they're in museum collections, sort of drawer after drawer of these beautiful dead bodies. Mm-hmm. But of course, that raven is not the raven. The raven is only its life. And Desprez says, if you think of a bird's body, it isn't the little feathered thing. The bird's body is that entire stretch of country that is filled with its song. Mm. And the bird exists not only in the kind of material of its bone and feather, but in the extent of its song. And the extent of its song is also the extent of the territory that it controls. And I think that is an absolutely exquisite idea about the nature of organisms, that they are not actually, their physicality. They are their enlarged being.
I mean, we think that of ourselves.
We think that of ourselves. Well, certainly Donald Trump does.
Well, we're not just
we're huge.
just not our bodies.
No, we're much more than our bodies. And so, can I read you what I think the blackbird says?
No.
Oh, okay. No, I could. Could I?
Go ahead.
Could I? Okay, so there's a lot in here about birdsong, but there's a marvellous man, a Danish man called Torben Davelstein, who's investigated blackbird song, and he says, or this is me kind of paraphrasing him really, we can't read the blackbird's mind, but we can see the effect of his song on other birds, whether they're rival males or receptive females. He's communicating his blackbirdness, his maleness, his presence, his quality as a mate, his relationship to that particular place, his breeding status, perhaps his ancestry, and his potential for aggression. Remember, this is in Denmark, okay? So if one could translate into English the notes you hear all spring and summer from the blackbirds around you, and there are lovely blackbirds here, I've been watching them. Interestingly, slightly smaller than English blackbirds. So I think this is what a blackbird is saying. I'm a blackbird. I'm male. This is my place. My name is Hamlet, since I'm Danish, obviously. I want a wife. In fact, I already have a wife, but I might want another wife. I did hear my father say something very like this. His father probably taught him. But this is also what the others like to say. They are always copying me, and I don't like them. But I prefer them to strangers. I prefer the people who live next to me to the people who might just wander in. Certainly don't trust my uncle. And I like this new phrase I've learned with a hey and a ho and a hey nonny no. I can sing with the best of them. I am proud, vengeful, and ambitious. I can sing on, and I'll say it again. Don't mess with me. I have wings as swift as thoughts of love. But listen to this. I'm sure you can't match it, and I don't want you here. But what a piece of work is a blackbird. In action, how like an angel, the paragon of animals. I am indeed the Prince of Denmark. That's what you've got to hear them say. I don't know if anybody wants to ask a question. Or comments to say. There's a lady say yes.
Thank you. It's very, very interesting and it's very attractive. We know that birds sleep around 10 to 12 hours a day, right?
Well, they will go to sleep when it gets dark, and they will wake when it gets light. So in the far north, they will sleep much less than that in the summer. And here, if you have a 10 or 12-hour night, that's what they will sleep.
Uh-huh. Do we know in which country there is an increased number of birds, or it's difficult to know?
Well, I think that globally birds are in trouble because their environment is being hammered in different ways. I know there are some seabirds which are increasing in numbers, like the northern gannet, for example. I think very few songbirds and very few migratory birds are increasing in number. One that is, which I know also is here, comes here in the winter, the turtle dove. Until a couple of years, I think maybe 4 years ago now, very large numbers of turtle doves were being shot in Europe. I think 1 million a year on their migration. And everybody agreed 4 years ago, all the shooting groups, to stop. And in the years since that moratorium has been imposed, the numbers of those turtle doves in Europe has increased by 400,000 pairs. And so it is perfectly possible to do things which will allow some reverse of those graphs. There are places in England where very, very chemical farms have literally been abandoned and nothing done to them for 40, 50 years. And in those places, the bird populations have all of the beautiful nightingales, warblers, whitethroats, grasshopper, all kinds of beautiful birds have all increased. And so I don't feel, I feel that the powers of destruction are vast. But there are things to be said. What?
Are there any bird paradises left?
I don't know what the answer to that is. I really don't know. I think maybe, people here might know of a bird paradise. I really don't know. I don't think there is. But I'm no expert.
Jardin Majorelle is pretty close. It's amazing, the unbelievable bird song, and then you also hear the highway. You're so close, but it's just like one wall away has created this oasis.
There's been some very good science about birds sing much louder if there's traffic nearby.
Is that right?
Yeah. And the loudest places they sing are near airports. This one's landing, God! So, no, it's the garden. The garden is an answer to this, because the garden is a place in which one can create, like here, the way in which the bougainvilleas are kind of wrapping the trunks of the palm trees, make these huge sausages of sort of private place for birds, absolute nest heavens, nest multi-story car parks in there. And it's absolutely wonderful to see it. And walking around here early this morning, the bulbuls just singing and crying away. I looked them up, and they say, "Quick, doctor, quick, quick." Do you know they say, "Quick, doctor, quick, quick"? So, make a garden. Yeah, that's definitely an answer. Make a garden.
We see on the social media or videos or images of fascinating birds, and what is their role in life? What do they do between each other? Is it an AI or is it true?
Which was this video?
We receive them. They circulate among people about birds. Fascinating, almost unbelievable what they do. So how do we know if it's true or is it invented by the AI?
I would say close the laptop and go outside.
Thank you.
Any-
You probably meant all these mating dances that are so unbelievable, no?
Yeah.
No, I'm sure they're true.
There's amazing, like miraculous things in the book of what the birds do to attract mates and I don't know what you saw, but it is pretty.
They are.
amazing.
I think the more they're investigating, this thing that's been discovered recently is that it seems likely that in starlight, in other words, not in complete dark and not in very well illuminated things. So starlight is the perfect level for this. Birds can see the magnetic field of the Earth. In some part of their brain, they apparently can see the force lines of the magnetic field. And so they are flying through a completely living 3D grid which allows them, of course, to navigate through the world. And they've done some extraordinary experiments about this. Some birds called thrush nightingales, relatives of nightingales, from Sweden, in the autumn, just right now, come south across the Mediterranean, across the Sahara, and down south into sub-Saharan Africa. And in order to cross the Sahara, they need to acquire extra fat so they don't need to stop and refeed themselves. And so the thrush nightingales arrive on the north coast of Egypt and Libya is where they've done this, and stay there fattening for the journey, which then allows them to go south. But now they took some of these thrush nightingales in Sweden and put them into a room which had the magnetic field conditions of the north shore of Egypt. So magnetically, the birds thought that they were in Egypt. And those birds that were in Sweden but in magnetic Egypt put on a lot of fat for the journey. Just reading the magnetic field allowed them to say, okay, we're now ready for the journey. So, I mean, I think one of the things about this is we cannot assume that we know what they are.
And what they know.
Or that our forms of understanding are in any way superior or equal to theirs. I mean, which of us could start feeding up on the north shore of Egypt? Perhaps all of us, actually, judging by what's happened in Marrakech so far this weekend. But, you know, I mean, I think it's that level of accepting one's ignorance and to be amazed. There's this thing about the owls, a tawny owl with doo-doo owl, the hooting owl, that it also apparently can see what it hears. There is a nerve link between its auditory complex and its visual complex. And so it may be that when an owl hears a mouse rustling in the grass, which is how it largely hunts, some part of its brain sees that sound in the dark, which allows it to catch it. Which would be a useful thing, wouldn't it?
But that was what struck me the most about your book, is just that our perspective and our knowledge is perhaps just unique to the way we think and what we...
Yes.
There's a whole
We're us.
other intelligence and way of thinking about time and
Yes.
space and...
There is, and each species has its own unique, what the biologists call its Umwelt, its kind of sense of its surrounding world. So I was in a bird colony in Scotland where there are these enormous seabirds hacking around, just as terrifying, huge razor bills and thing. And in among them were 3 tiny little wrens, totally indifferent to what these giant birds were doing, but beating hell out of each other. So what the hell are you doing here? You know, so not noticing that these kind of huge mastodons were kind of striding around them. Yeah. So it's an everlasting kind of curiosity journey, this. You know, it's everlasting, I think, yeah.
No, it's made your life better, hasn't it?
Oh my God, am I not better now for this? I know, I was in such a terrible shape. So
Thank you.
There's one more question.
oh. Bonsoir.
Bonsoir. On le fait en français ou en
En
anglais?
français, si vous voulez, pourquoi pas.
Oh, my English is not good.
Okay, my
No,
French
I
is
have
rubbish.
one question. What do you think the future of bird in United Kingdom?
What is their future?
Yeah, yes.
I have some optimism because there are places, little pockets,
Right.
where a resurgence is apparent. And you don't need to give it nature or bird life much room to thrive. If you just allow it a bit of space, take the lid off, it'll be fine. But I don't have any optimism about the agro-industrial chemical complex, which completely dominates the agricultural world, industrialized world. So I have a very double
Ok.
take on it.
J'ai parcouru, un peu votre parcours en tant qu'écrivain et j'ai remarqué le paysage est important pour vous.
Ouais,
La mer, l'histoire.
ouais.
Dans Bird School, donc j'ai pas lu, mais j'ai fait des recherches. Il y a quelque chose de, j'ai l'impression presque de spirituel et d'observation. C'est comme une prière pour vous, c'est vrai?
Oui, en français ou en anglais, peut-être. Il y en a quelque chose de spirituel, mais je ne veux pas le faire l'essence primaire, si on peut le dire, parce que les faux matériaux, the truths of where they are now is more important to me than what it might reflect on another world. I remember reading a long time ago an American philosopher who said that he, I agreed with this, was not interested in transcendence, in moving beyond this world, but incendence, climbing into this world. That's what's the really revelatory thing, when you get in, not beyond. Yeah. Good. Incendence. American. I don't know his name now.
Hi, Mr. Adam. Thank you for having us. Thank you for this.
Thank you for coming, for God's sake.
Information. So it's very useful information. So I've been in Lake District in England, and I like hiking a lot. So I noticed that green in England is much more than sometimes in some other countries. And I was wondering about the birds, especially when human beings interact with the way where they live by less greens, buildings. So is there, like, from your knowledge, much organization or at least NGOs that can protect national parks or the places where that can at least save these creatures from disappearing?
Well, it's a very interesting question because there are many organizations which are dedicated to protecting the well-being of nature in Britain. Huge numbers of people belong to them, many, many millions of members of the organizations, but they have all completely failed to protect nature. And I think the reason is obviously going to be complex, but I think it's what Deborah was talking about, that as long as it looks okay, you can assume it is okay. And only if you go down a layer and look at those graphs, for example, can you start to see that there is some very, very deep damage being done probably to the invertebrate life. That, there's this disappearance of bugs from Europe. They've gone. When you drive through Europe, your windscreen does not get covered in bugs anymore. And so there's like a whole disappear. I mean, it's, I think, a major catastrophe. And the very, very disappointing
of the way we go about these kind of things, like we're going to take this these things are entirely integrated systems of dependency, and we're like, well, we're going to feed the birds, that's going to make them happy. It's a quite, even with a lot of NGOs and organizations, it's almost a paternalistic, like, we're going to help by doing X.
Yeah, I think
one element doesn't ever.
It's fascinating. It's very, well, I think my word for that is like instrumental. You can apply a tool and woof, there you go, end of story. Despite the fact that for more than a century, people have understood about ecological relationships and trophic cascades. If you trash things up here, it ripples all the way down and all the way back up again.
Right. But that's not the way we approach
No, it isn't.
Or our problems.
No. Well, I made a film a few years ago about the whaling industry, the European whaling industry. And the kind of most prominent fact was that the year in which most whales were killed by the European and American was the last year any whales were economically available to be killed.
Oh, interesting.
So that we went right the way up, all the way up, right the way up to the cliff, and then bang, like that. And people had known for 100 years that things were in trouble. And so you might expect a kind of natural graph like that, but not at all. People went on killing until there was literally nothing left to kill. And I think there is something about a hunter mentality that does that. And so maybe these are deep psychological structures which are dangerous to nature. Yeah, dangerous.
Good evening. Thank you very much.
Good evening again.
You again. You spend time watching the birds, but did you ever get the feeling they were watching you?
Yeah, that's a very good question.
And also, in the same vein, do you feel there's a sort of personal or individual relation that can exist between a human being and a bird?
Well, I have a great friend who says whenever he goes into a bookshop and sees the section called bird watching, he looks for the books which are about birds watching us. And there are never any there. For all the reasons we've been talking about, there's the assumption of human primacy. And it's a very brilliant question, and I would love to write a book as a bird about these huge, clumsy, overfed mammals wandering around the wood, which weirdly somehow transform their eyes into vast eyes. And of course, they look at you all the time. And one of the great things about a hide is that they don't see you. You know, they don't know you're there. And so you can be. But there are people I know who have birds in their houses who come and live with them and come onto their heads and hands, and they feed them and have a kind of close relationship. But always
With that wren,
about a month, I think.
and it never let you look at it.
It shat all over the inside of the house. I picked up my pen once and it was totally gluey with but they won't be caught. They won't be held. And I think you could say one of the beauties of birds is in their resistance to us. You know, their refusal to be dog-like with us. You know, the dog is a wonderful thing, isn't it? Because he loves us or she loves us so much. And the birds don't have that. And I think there is a grand dignity in the bird's indifference to us. It's just the nicest thing to come here to talk about birds in the wood at home, and how incredibly grateful I am to you, Madison, to everybody here for looking after us so beautifully well. It's been a great, great treat, and to talk to you this evening. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.